So what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Helen Keller? Most remember her as a deaf and blind girl who overcame all the odds and learned to read, write, and even speak. Maybe some would say she's an inspiration and a hero. All of this is true, but this only tells the first 20 years of her life. History has effectively erased the rest. The truth is, Helen Keller was a revolutionary, not just any other revolutionary. She was a radical socialist. In 1909, she joined the Socialist Party of Massachusetts and even was an avid supporter of the Russian Revolution. With her red Soviet flag, she praised the Soviet Union in much of her work. In one quote, she said, "The country is governed for the richest, for the corporations, the bankers, the land speculators, and for the exploiters of labor. The majority of mankind are working people, so long as their fair demands, the ownership and control of their livelihoods, are set at naught, we can have neither men's rights nor women's rights. The majority of mankind is ground down by industrial oppression in order that the small remnant may live in ease." Later on, she joined the Industrial Workers of the World, or called IWW for short, which was a union promoting the unification of the American working class into one union. This union promoted the workers owning the means of production, which led to this union being actively persecuted under Woodrow Wilson. In her explanation to why she became an IWW, she said, quote, "It is my nature to fight as soon as I see wrongs to be made right. So after I read Wells and Marx and learned what I did, I joined a socialist branch." But most famously, Helen Keller advocated and helped people with disabilities. However, she soon realized in her work that she was treating a symptom and not a cause. Unlike the previous beliefs that blindness was spread randomly throughout the population, Keller noticed that blindness was occurring much more in the poor and the working class. From industrial factory accidents to lack of medical care, the blindness rates were much more common among the poor at the time. Through this, she voiced her thoughts about the horrible conditions in the factories, and she went to visit many factories and sweatshops. In one famous quote, she described the conditions in the factories by saying, "If I could not see it, I could smell it." But not only was Helen Keller an outspoken pro-worker activist, Keller fought for the freedom of speech by helping found the American Civil Liberties Union. She also showed open support for the NAACP, fought for women's rights, and raised money for the American Foundation of the Blind. However, all this didn't come without public backlash. Amid the height of the Red Scare, a time period where there was increasing paranoia and backlash against communism, Helen Keller was highly criticized by the media. Through this, she became one of the most controversial women of her time. Many media outlets and newspapers questioned her intelligence and emphasized her disabilities. In response to the media criticism, Helen Keller said, quote, "But now that I have come out for socialism, he reminds me and the public that I am deaf and blind and especially liable to error." Despite this unpopularity, Keller even wrote a letter to the leader of the American Communist Party, who was in jail at the time. She even showed open support for the NAACP, which did not sit well with her home state of Alabama at the time. Ironically, Alabama, 40 years later, put Helen Keller on the state quarter in 2003. In conclusion, despite this very public record of radical socialism throughout her whole life, many history textbooks leave this part out and continue to sugarcoat the history of Helen Keller. Many people will not agree with many of Helen Keller's views. After all, she was a supporter of the USSR. However, it is important to recognize that Helen Keller is not the image history textbooks and the media present her to be. Her life is about her courageous advocacy for the disabled, and equally as important, her fight for socialism.